Y'all planning for this?
Welcome back, TPR Nation. This is Jaime Schleinsky in an episode of Worlds to Conquer, and I want to tell you something that gets me fired up. I get so mad, and I have to really hold myself back from just ripping into a person when this happens. And that is when I specifically tell somebody what to do, and they choose not to do it. And then later, that becomes my problem to have to fix, or my solution to have to come up with, or I have to be involved in some part of the remedy for whatever situation in my mind was completely preventable. And so I want to talk to you about that today, because I think if it happens to me, it is definitely happening to you. And there are two ways that this gets me fired up at work about. And that is if I ask a team member to do something and they do not do it, or if I tell a client specifically not to do something that could be detrimental to their financial plan and they still do it. And so we have those type of team members. We have those type of clients that listen to what you tell them to do, but don't act upon what you say. And that creates so much more work for me later when they come back and things aren't done, or it's incorrect, or all of these different situations start to pop up. So I want to talk to you about how I go about resolving some of those issues. So when it happens to you, and it will happen to each and every one of us, you have those tools and those resources available for you as well. So let's dive into team members. Okay, team members, we give instructions. Now, I've shared with you before, we practice the DISC, D-I-S-C, and it's behavioral analysis. And it just tells us that every single one of us has 4 different personality traits inside of us, but 2 of them are the most dominant. And the D stands for a driver. This is a person that's be bold, be brief, be gone. Quick decision makers. They're normally people that have knee-jerk reactions, good or bad. It's not a lack of impulse control. It's just that mentally they're running so much faster than most people because they're not spending enough time evaluating the pros and cons. So the D stands for a driver. And then you have your I, and your high I is your influencer. Now, not in the Instagram, Facebook kind of way, but your influencer is a social person. This is the person that takes an elevator ride with another individual and comes out with a new BFF. A lot of times realtors are high I individuals because they love to talk to new people. They love to show different homes. You can also start to see a high I person because they're normally really into fashion. They love bold statements and bold colors and different types of clothing. They might even have seasonal wardrobes. So your high I's are really your people. And then you have the S, and the S stands for steady. And this is a very steady, consistent person. Normally you can tell a high S because their dog could have just died and you would never see it on their face. They've got a really good poker face. If you're married to a high S, you're probably constantly screaming, use your words, tell me, what are you thinking? I don't know what's going on inside of your head, because they're just real steady in that sense. High S's on the downside are also normally kind of selfish. They're very self-centered. They're always thinking about how things apply to them. And that doesn't mean that they are monetarily or with tangible items selfish. That just means every situation, every story, if somebody says, oh my gosh, I'm a retired CIA agent, they go, oh my gosh, I always thought about being a CIA agent. And if somebody else says, I run a B&B in Vermont, they're like, I've always dreamt of running a B&B in Vermont. How does that go? And so these are people that they put a context or a lens as to every story, how it applies to them. And then you have your high C's, and a high C is a compliance person. This is a person that follows the rules. This is normally a very analytical individual. This is a person that is very detailed, thoughtful. If you have them as a client, they're the ones that when you say, how much are your RMDs? Oh, they're about $18,000. Well, if it's $17,656, they're going to come back and tell you that you miscalculated it because you rounded up and that wasn't specific. So a lot of times a high C can be like engineer mind, just very analytical, very detail oriented. They're the only ones in the world that want the 200-page financial plan so that they can pore over every single detail. So we practice that. The way that we use this in our office is that before somebody hires on and comes to our firm, we have them take one of these assessments. This is not a deal breaker for us. This is not a you get hired or you get fired based on this. This is a tool, and this is tells us about your communication styles, tells us how you process things, what you like, what you don't like. One of the things that I always tell people is that it is a computer. You are a person, so it's going to get 90% of this information correct, and 10% of it's probably going to be garbage. It's not you at all. But we got to figure that place out. So this is a powerful tool for me. And I use it in my organization that before I'm about to, I'm going to say chew into someone, but before I want to have a one-on-one with somebody because I'm hot over a topic, maybe pissed off at them for some reason, I have to check my high D. I'm a high D. I'm a very, very high, 98%. And so I'm quick-tempered, but then I'm over it. You know, once I've kind of let that passion run its course, I'm done with it. I don't hold on to it forever like a high S or high C would. Those are people that normally hold grudges and they hold them for a really long time. People that are high Ds and high Is normally get over it very fast. So every one of us has all 4 traits of these personalities inside of us. It's just that two of those traits are more dominant than the others. So if you haven't taken time for you and your team to run some type of assessment like this, we use DISC, D-I-S-C, for driver, influencer, steady, compliant. There's also the Colby. You're still getting the same information. This is stuff that's been researched for over 100 years. There are 4 different major personality traits. You're still going to get those 4 results. So whatever you use, it's a fun thing to do for a team. Also, when I do this with team training, this is a phenomenal thing. Everyone loves this topic when I bring in a trainer to talk on this subject matter. And it really helps us. We even use it in our own financial planning practice, Shalansky & Associates, our RIA up in Anchorage, Alaska. We do it with clients. We do it with clients so we can start to get their communication styles. And once you know your client's driving personality traits, you can, and we flag those in our Infinity, our CRM, our custom CRM that my brother Micah Shalansky and I built over this last 7 years. And we flag those with the clients because now we can have our team members adapt how they talk and how they communicate. So if I've got my operations team member talking to a client that's a super high C, they know that they're not rounding up dollars. They're getting down to the penny. If I've got a team member that needs to get on the phone with a high I, they know that they're going to schedule that phone call not during the busiest part of the day because the high I is probably going to be pretty chatty. They know if they're calling a driver, they need to be down to the specifics and what is the call to action and allow that person to make a decision. Normally, if I'm in a meeting with a high D, my appointment is 10 or 15 minutes because they're just running faster and can get through things quicker than most individuals. So a really great way to kind of profile your clients, if you will, and schedule things out accordingly. I stack my morning with high Ds. They're normally morning people. And I put my more steady or high Is down at the bottom of the day so they have more time to visit, more time to chit chat without getting me behind schedule for the rest of the day. So just one ways that we use it. So when I'm talking to my team members and I'm remembering which personality trait is their dominant one, it helps me counter mine because I can come into every situation and just ream into somebody and be like, this, and this, and this, and this. Why wasn't it done? You know, and I have no problem doing that. And then turning around the next day and treating you with the same amount of dignity. I'm not going to hold on to that passion. We're going to go through it and then I'm consider it resolved or not resolved. And if it's not resolved, you're probably not the right team member or we got to do some more work on this. But if it's resolved, I'm ready to move on. But if I have that attitude, if I allow those passions to run the course with a high I, high S, and high C, that's not going to give me a great experience. If I'm dealing with other high Ds, they're gonna match it, right? We're gonna lock horns. We're gonna go through whatever topic we have to go through, and we're not going to walk away with our feelers hurt. But if I'm talking to a high I, S, or C, that is different conversation. I now have to adapt my leadership style to a way that is more amiable towards the other individual. So if I'm dealing with a high I got to come into that conversation, giving them time to chat. So if I'm having a corrective one-on-one with a high I might start the conversation off with, hey, school's back in schedule. Is everyone in routine? How are we doing at home? And I might kind of go through all of those touchy-feely points with a high I because their emotions are always dominating their behavior in the workplace. So if they've got a parent that's ailing and sick. I'm not going to get the best in the work because they're constantly distracted and their mind and their hearts are with that ailing parent. If their kids are kind of going through some difficulties, they could just need to voice those. Whatever is going on with that high I emotionally, I need to address first before I get into the specifics of what my problem is. Now, this is kind of hard, right? Because as employers, we don't pay employees to solve their personal issues. However, leadership is about motivating, inspiring, and aspiring other individuals to be at their absolute best. And this is the other half of it. This is the other side of it. If you come in a dictatorial fashion, you're going to have people that follow orders until they find another environment they would rather be a part of. A lot of individuals don't like to be barked at work. They will tolerate it until something else better comes along. And I don't want those type of people. I want an entire culture built on people that want to give their absolute best so that we can deliver massive value to clients. So I have to take that high I into consideration. Now, if I'm dealing with a high S or a high C, I really have to couch myself. I have to couch myself to talk slower and not jump to conclusions. I need to hold the pause. I need to be present in the pause. So if I say something to a high I or high D, they're immediately giving me a response. I mean, I will not finish my last syllable before they're jumping in to answer that. But when I'm dealing with a high S or a high C, I need to shut my mouth and give them time to process and time to think about what I just said. And there could be a really long pause that would make other people uncomfortable, but it's not them ignoring. It's not them not knowing an answer, not wanting to give an answer. They're just processing what you're saying. They're running it through a bunch of different gauntlets to kind of figure out what their feelings are or where they land on that side of it. If it's a high S, I'm going through and I'm making sure that I'm 100% truthful, 100% truthful. Nothing is dramatized. I need to tell them good, bad, and ugly truth. Sometimes people think that high S's can't handle the truth. They can absolutely handle the truth. Now, if you lie to them, you will never have their trust back again. They will never, ever trust you again. It could be something that happened in junior high and they'll be like, yeah, I don't know, like you handed me the chocolate milk, but you poured regular milk into it and I don't trust any drink from you in the next, 100 years. But if you're dealing with a high C, they're data people. And so they need the facts, they need the figures, they need the analytical information to figure out how they feel about that topic. And a lot of times I can get a high C to come around when I drive the conversation based on facts. If we say, hey, great, we're going to grow the firm over 10%. This is what's happening, blah, blah, blah. And and they're like, oh my gosh, that's too much work. And I say, great. Well, let's look at this. And we go through the calendar together. And I say, this is what it means for appointments. This is what it means for outside of surge. And then they're like, oh, okay, hold on a second. Yeah, there's more than enough time. We can absolutely do that. But they need the analytics. They need to walk through how that is going to logistically work. So when I'm conversing with my team, I have to take all of this into consideration. And by the way, on an individual basis. Now, there are some days I don't want to couch who I am. I don't want to bend my personality trait to an employee's. So how do I deal with that? Well, I deal with it in here's a great example. When we are about to do a seminar or we're having a public presentation, I will normally come into that room, Storm and Norman, and take control and say, hey, I need this here, this here, this here, this here. And I will start barking at things that were not done correctly. Now, if you don't know me and you haven't worked with me for a while, you're thinking, oh my gosh, that woman is Yep, you can fill in the blank and it's probably not flattering. But if you know me, you know that I'm just in my take control, get this done so that we can all have a better experience mindset. So how do I deal with that? What I do is I come into the event and I say, hey, listen, we're opening our doors in 30 minutes. This room is not set up the way that it needs to be set up. So everyone, I'm going to start barking a lot of orders. I'm going to start giving a lot of instructions. I'm going to be super, super demanding. And don't take it personal. I just need to get this stuff done. So when we open those doors, doors and we have a flood of prospects walk through them, we're all at our best. Is everyone okay with that? And then all of a sudden, now am I really asking their permission? No, but I'm telling them this is what's coming. So don't take it personal. I'm not mad at you. My niece, I often talk about her. She's a high S. She's very high S, very high C, which is countering to my high D, high I. And so when I talk to her, she's like, well, you're mad. And I'm like, I'm not mad. And she's like, you're mad because my tone, because the way I'm talking, because I'm very direct, because I'm very to the point. She finds that, she interprets that as me being mad about something. And conversely, because she's that high S, I'm always telling her, Jaslyn, use your words. Use your words. I don't know what your face is saying because she has an RBF. And so I'm like, you have to articulate. You got to tell me what you're feeling. You got to tell me what you're thinking. What about this? And I have to ask probably 5 times more questions to her than I do to anyone else, because when it comes to having a conversation, I carry much of that load. I have to carry the conversation because she's okay with the silence. She's okay with processing things. She doesn't need to fill it in. And she doesn't need to overly share. But if I say, hey, why didn't you tell me about this? She said, you didn't ask me. So this is the type of people. And if you have this as somebody in your life, maybe it's an employee, maybe it's a spouse or a child, and you recognize that they are this high S, high C, you're just going to have to shoulder more of that conversation. You're going to have to do more of that work. All right. So when I'm talking to my employees, when I'm talking to my team members about these subjects, I'm making sure I'm taking that personality trait into consideration. The second thing that I really like about doing the DISC reports is it also tells me how they process information. So do I need to be verbal? Do I need to write it down? Do I need to do a couple of demonstrations? What needs to happen to make them effective at their job? Because if you are riddled with meeting after meeting after meeting with team members, it is because you as a leader are ineffective in your communication. Your team is not understanding what they need to get done because you as a leader have not articulated it properly. Recently, had a team member, I had to pull, and because the high D in me thinks that by the time I've sent you an email, the work that I asked you to do should already be done. I have to check myself constantly to check dates and timelines to make sure I'm not thinking it should be done because I gave it to you Friday night and now it's Saturday afternoon and I don't know where it's at. So I'm always reminding myself to, hey, slow down, pull it up. How long is this actually taking? So I had a team member. I told her to do something. 10 days had passed. It wasn't done. I asked where it was. They said, oh, I'm going to get an example, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to work on this, etc. And I said, okay, great. Make sure you get it to me. Have any questions, just let me know. She said, all right, we'll do. All right. 3 weeks passed from the original event of me asking. 3 weeks. All right. Now my head is about to explode. Now I'm mad. Now I'm like, why aren't you doing what I told you to do? Now, there are a plethora of reasons, and because what I told her to do, 1, she had never done before. 2, she was tying with that one, completely inexperienced on it, but she also felt really outside of her comfort zone. Now, where I faulted in this, I did not give her a deadline. I did not say, get this to me by this day. So when I'm dealing with my high S's and high C's, I want to be really specific about what the instruction is, what I'm asking them to do, and then also give them a deadline. If this is something that they have never done before, I'm probably going to extend that deadline a little bit because they're going to take longer to get it done than I think is necessary. So really looking at your team, really looking at your environment, really looking at how can you adjust to have the most positive effect possible. Because one of the things I hate doing, there's a big difference between leading and managing. When you're leading, you're bringing people up the mountainside, right? Like you were headed to the next peak because they didn't even know it was possible to leave the ground. And so I love leading. But managing is about a whole lot of adult babysitting. It's about a lot of follow-up with people about whether or not they're getting their work done. Everyone wants the perks of being outside of Surge. Everyone wants the Flex Fridays. They want the limited time off. They want all of these different things. But a lot of times they forget that those come with a lot of responsibilities to do what you said you're going to do. And so when you're managing, you're having to be that adult daycare person, which is really frustrating. It is that is why managers bail constantly on organizations because they don't want to have to do that. In fact, they say, I love doing my work. I love working with the clients. I love doing these new ideas, but man, I don't want to manage people any longer. And so when you're doing this adult babysitting, which is what it pretty much is, you're having to follow up continually. Did you get your work done? Did it get out? What happened here? What happened there? And it's really, really mind numbing. And I don't want the kind of people working for me that I'm having to continually do that with. But inevitably, when you run an organization and it gets bigger than just a handful of people, that's what ends up happening. You have to follow up with people. So how do we solve that at Schlansky and Associates? Well, one of the things that we do is we create a perfect week. So we have an agenda in Surge and we have an agenda outside of Surge. Everyone knows what they should be doing and when they should be doing. Second thing, deadlines. You've got to give your team members deadlines, because especially if you are a leader and you're a high D, much like myself, then your deadline in your mind is now. It's now. Get this done now. And it's not happening in that capacity. So you want to make sure that you give them a deadline that they can work with and achieve. And then you got to put that deadline on the calendar. You got to mark it down. I keep a wall calendar next to my desk. So when I'm talking to my team members, it goes in two places. I don't add things normally to my calendar. I have my executive assistant do that, but I'll mark it on my wall calendar. Hey, I need the one-page financial plans. I told everyone to have them done by September 15th. And I'll mark that deadline down on my calendar because I'm handing out a lot of deadlines. And then as we get closer, 1 week before that deadline, I will remind everyone, by the way, this should be finished by September 15th. Da, 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 da. Is anyone off track? Does anyone not on schedule to get that done? Why? Because when will they start doing that work? Come on. It's Parkinson's law. Everyone adheres to it. The work takes up the amount of time that you have allowed for that work, meaning that everyone is deadline driven. You will do the work when the deadline approaches. And if you have several months in advance that you can wait on that deadline, you're going to. That's what you're going to do. You're going to wait until that deadline gets closer, and then you're going to be scrambling to smash all that work in right then and there. So making sure that communicating with team members, giving them those deadlines. All right, the next thing that you have to do, and I talk to so many owners and leaders in organizations, and they're frustrated and they're like, hey, that's not what I told my employee to do. What I told them to do was X, Y, and Z. And I say, great. I think there's some miscommunication about what they heard. Can you show me where this is written down? Can you show me the policy or the process that's been written down for them to follow on this? Because sometimes we'll tell team members audibly what we want to transpire, and it will be crystal clear in our heads, but it will be absolute Greek to that employee. So we want to have these verbal conversations, but then we got to follow it up. We have to follow it up with written policies and procedures of what we are expecting. I cannot tell you how many times I have talked to leaders who are about to blow a gasket because they're so frustrated that an employee didn't do what they told them to do. And I say, great, well, where is that documented? And they say, I didn't document it. I told them to do it. All right, well, what you expressed verbally might not have been recorded, and it also didn't give an opportunity for that employee to come back and revisit it. Because when we are asking employees to do something, we are expecting it to immediately transpire, and forgetting that that team member had a bunch of other work that they were probably already working on. And so they're going to get around to that task when they have finished or feel the priority for that task is warranted. And then they're going to have to try to recall what you said to them verbally. So anytime we're asking, and I do this a lot and I forget about it. And I'll tell an employee, I'll say, hey, can you go do this, this, and this? And they'll say, yeah, got it. No problem. Absolutely. And then I'll come back a couple of days later and I'll look at the product of their work and I'm like, what is this garbage? That is not what I asked for at all. And so I'll go back and I'll look in my emails and I'll look on my chats and I'll look at my notes and find where I told them written down to follow those instructions. And if I did not write it down, if it was not in a meeting that I hit the record button on, if I did not do a Loom video in which I could get back to them and tell them, hey, go clean this up, go do these are things, or these are my instructions. If that process is not somehow, some way documented, then it is not the employee's fault for poor execution. It's the leader's fault for poor communication. We have to own that and have responsibility over that. Because employees aren't wanting to fail us. They're not wanting to do half-ass work. They're not wanting to be sloppy. They're trying to get the best job that they know how to do done. But sometimes we as leaders forget to communicate exactly what done looks like. We need to paint done. The end result should look like this. I was just working with one of my leads and I was saying, hey, before you start that project, why don't you guys paint done? Why don't you begin the project by describing the user manual? Write the user manual on this first, because as you begin to write that user manual, you're going to start thinking about all of the little technicalities and logistics you had forgotten about when you were just describing or developing a process. If you have to paint done and define that user experience, define that process for that user to go through at the very end, you're going to go, oh, this wasn't clear. Hold on a second. Let me change that. Let me do this. And you're going to be able to justify, move, change, correct, add, and create instructions that are effective to the team member trying to execute things. So when it comes to really pissing me off because you didn't do what I told you to do, I have to first stop and say, did I clearly communicate those instructions? And the kind of the joke in the corporate world, right, is that for clarity, here's exactly what I mean. Clarity is kindness. I always say that. Clarity is kindness. I want to be crystal clear in my instructions. I want to tell you what the deadline is. I want to tell you that is not client ready. I want to tell you exactly what I expect done to look like. Never in my career did I think I would have to define done so often, but I do, because especially if we're doing a large project and I say, hey, is this done? And they'll say, yeah, absolutely, it's done. And we just did one this summer. We just went through and updated all of our one-page plans for clients for the fall. And as we got done, I said, hey, are these all done? And my paraplanner said, yeah, they're all done. I'm so excited. I'm right on track. I did 200 of the one-page plans. They're all done and they're all updated. And I started saying, great, I'd love you to print them down. Let's go through them one by one. She says, and she comes up with 2 stacks. There's 2 stacks of paper. I say, why are there 2 stacks? She goes, oh, these are the ones I didn't have questions on. These are the ones that I did have questions on. That's not done. That's not done. That means that they are draft ready. You still had questions. You still have things that you don't have answers to. That's not done. But I didn't paint done. That done needed to be client deliverable ready. We're going to go into that conference room and we're going to have all areas of financial planning spelled out. That executive summary, that one-page plan is going to look beautiful. We're going to be able to present on that. So make sure when you're talking to your team members, paint done for them. Make sure you're clearly communicating instructions. Record those instructions. It could be Loom videos. We're really big on that in our office. I just recorded one this morning to my executive assistant. I wanted her to put together an itinerary. I didn't like the first one, told her to go back and do it. She gave me a second one. I said, hey, this is still not done the way I want it to be done. And I jumped on Loom and I showed her all the ways it was done wrong. Now, when I jumped on Loom and I started explaining all the ways I thought that this was done wrong or sloppy or incorrect, it would have been dramatically faster for me to just do that work. I was already looking at the flights. I was already looking at confirmation numbers. I was already looking at hotel venue information. I could have just come in there and done that work for her. But once you've delegated something, you cannot take it back, because the next time I ask her to come up with an itinerary in that same format, it's not going to be what I want, because the last time she did it, I just fixed it for her. So instead, I jump up to Loom. I record a quick video. I go over the cells. I say, hey, I'm going to show you this particular day, this Monday. This is what I want all the rest of the week to look like. And I was articulate. I showed her examples of it. And I said, now go fix it. Do better. Do better. But if I had taken that back, if I had taken that small task back and I just fixed it because it would be faster and easier and more efficient for me as the executive, guess what the next itinerary would have looked like? It would look like more of a chore for me to have to go fix and me to have to do. So making sure we're recording those tasks, making sure that we're telling people clearly what the instructions are so that they can go back and really reassess those. That comes down to the leadership. That's about effective communication. If you find yourself riddled with meetings every single week and there are just a plethora of them on your calendar and they're all with team members, guess what? Your communication probably isn't very good, because you're only having all of those mini meetings because you didn't clearly communicate something that needed to be communicated. So if you want to spend less time pissed off like me, make sure communication is vital like that. All right, this is part one of what pisses me off. And I've just explained when I'm talking to team members what really gets me roused up and ready to have frank conversations with them. But then I also shared with you the ways that I'm accountable for when things are not going the way that I want them to. So as we talk together today, TPR Nation, everything we do is about action items. So the very first action item I want you to take is, what is your policy and process communication policy? And that means when you're telling a team member exactly what you want done, how are you documenting that for them to understand? What does that look like in your office? Is it a side conversation? Are you ringing the gong and interrupting them intermittently throughout the day because your need became paramount for them to deal with right away? Or are you taking the time to write things down? Or if you're not a process writer, go hire a process writer. If you're not a written communicator, could you record a Loom video, attach it as a extension in your Chrome browser, and just fire that bad boy up? And anytime that you're delegating something or asking for something to be redone, clearly communicating what done looks like. And then I want you to add this in. This is another action item. Paint done. Paint done, define done, because a lot of times we get lousy work from people, not because they were sloppy or lazy, but because we didn't tell them what done looked like. We didn't explain the end game to them. So making sure you're doing that. TPR Nation, this is Jaime Shalansky, an episode of Worlds to Conquer. Go find people who share your values and change the world.
Hi, TPR listeners. This is Amber from your Follow-Up Fridays. You don't want to miss our next Nation Power Session, where Matt and Micah will be live to talk about where business planning fails and how to fix it to make 2024 your best year ever. You know that Matt and Micah have had years of wild growth and years of soul-crushing defeat. Through this, they've learned exactly what it takes to succeed and why so many advisors fail despite their best efforts. So join us Wednesday, October 18th at 9 a.m. Pacific to learn from the trenches how to set yourself up for success. Now, we only offer these Nation sessions a few times a year, so don't miss your chance. But just a warning, if you're hoping that ChatGPT or some trend can solve your problems, this is not the session for you. But if you're ready to put in the real work, well, then we'll see you there. Visit theperfectri.com/power session to save your spot today.
Hold on before we go. Something that you need to know. This isn't tax, legal, or investment advice. That isn't our intent. Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice. Be a better husband, father, mother, and wife.